Good evening, members and officers and members of the public. Thank you. Before I start, I would like to welcome Councillor Patrick Garton to his first meeting of this committee. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
He's replacing Councillor Perry, but Councillor Perry's here tonight as a substitute. Before we get to the agenda, may I take this opportunity to advise you that we are not expecting the fire alarm to sound tonight. So if it does, please remain seated, and Mrs Matthews, seated to my right here, will assess the situation and give further instructions on the evacuation of the building if appropriate. Tonight's proceedings will be webcast by the Council, but if anyone else is intending to record these proceedings, can you please let me know now? I ask this question not to stop you, but merely to ensure that members and other members of the public in the room know that this is taking place. One other thing, could I ask please that all mobile phones are switched off? Okay, we go to the agenda. Item 1 on the agenda is apologies for absence.
We've had apologies from Councillor Webster.
Okay. Thank you. Item 2, notification of substitute members.
Councillor Perry for Councillor Webster.
Thank you. Thank you. Item 3, there are no urgent items. Item 4, notification of visiting members. If there are any visiting members, could they please come forward to the table and state their name and the agenda item, please?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Councillor English. I will be speaking on item 12 now, but my main reason for being here this evening is item 16, CCTV.
Thank you. Item 5, disclosures by members and officers. Councillor Ring.
In the last 2 weeks, I've been asked to sign a petition about the closure of Heather House. I signed that form, my husband and I, in very open that we wouldn't like to see it be shut down. My reason of coming tonight is my other hat on as a councillor. And I'm really open to what could be said tonight. Would that change my mind? So I am quite happy to sit here to take part in this and to vote at the end. I'd like just a quick report from legal, if that's okay.
Robin.
I think, Councillor, that what you're indicating is that you are predisposed, but you are not predetermined, and you'll address the matter with an open mind. Yeah. Thank you.
Councillor Burton.
Thank you, Chairman. I think, as everybody here is aware this evening, I have been quite actively involved in the campaign to keep Heather House open. Given that I will also be presenting the petition on the matter this evening, I will be recusing myself from that item and leaving at the appropriate moment.
Thank you, Councillor Burton. You don't have to leave during the debate, but you will have to leave before any vote.
Can I just clarify then, does that mean that I will be able to have any input in the debate as long as it doesn't influence the direction of the decision, such as clarifying factual points?
Okay. That normally what would happen is, having presented the petition and made a statement when you present the petition that you would leave, so the chairman has allowed you to remain in the public gallery so that you are available should a question arise that only you could answer, but that then you will leave the room prior to the vote being taken.
Okay. Councillor Perry.
Thank you, Chairman, members. I also signed the petition, but I can assure the committee that I've read the working paper also very, very carefully, and I come to this committee completely with an open mind, and I shall listen to the discussion with interest and obviously make my mind up at the end of the meeting if we have to come to a vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Perry. Councillor Garton.
Mr. Chairman, yes. I signed the petition as well. I'm not predetermined on that. The petition was, in its phrasing in the sentence, quite open, inviting alternatives, and so therefore I'm although predisposed, but not predetermined.
Thank you, Councillor Garton. Anybody else? Sorry? No. Okay, thank you. Item 6, disclosures of lobbying. Any members been lobbied? That's all of us. Okay, thank you. Item 7, to consider whether any item should be taken in private because of the possible disclosure of exempt information. There are no Part 2 items. Oh, yes, there are. Sorry, that should come out there. There are some Part 2 items tonight, which we will get to later. Item 8, minutes of the meeting held on the 17th of October 2017. As usual, I will go through them page by page. If anyone's got any query, please call out. Page 1. Page 2. Page 3. I just have one point on page 3. In item 50 at the bottom, the local healthcare oral update from Councillor Gooch, it says, during the discussion, members of the committee felt that their concerns should be put in a letter to the West Kent Health and Wellbeing Board, signed by the Chairman and Vice Chairman of the committee and presented by Councillor Mrs Gooch at the next meeting of that board. We haven't had that letter yet, so just to let you know that so far it has not gone to that board. Page 4. Councillor Burton.
Yes, just one quick point. Fourth paragraph down on that page, I raised a question when we were looking at the budgetary update regarding the variance on the food and safety section. To my knowledge, I don't think we've had that email update unless I've missed it, so I was just wondering if that could be clarified or rolled over to the next meeting.
Okay. Page 5. Okay. Members agree that these are a true record and happy for me to sign them? Thank you. I'm now going to do a slight change to the agenda. I'm going to bring items 10 and 11 forward so that I can take items 9 and 12 together, which both pertain to Heather House. Everyone agreed on that? Thank you. Item 10, questions and answer session for members of the public, if any. Apart from the Heather House one, there are no questions from members of the public. Item 11, committee work programme. Anything to raise on that, members? No. I'll ask Mark Green if there's any updates.
No, nothing to add to that, Chairman.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, members. We now go back to item 9 on the agenda, which is presentation of petitions. I'd ask Councillor Matt Burton to come forward, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Musical chairs tonight. Just can I clarify beforehand, is this time sensitive, this delivery?
3 minutes.
3 minutes. Thank you. Good evening again, Chairman, members and officers, and of course to all of the good people who have given up their Tuesday evenings behind me in support of Heather House. I have the honour this evening of presenting a petition to you on behalf of Parkwood Residents Association, signed in just 10 days by 785 people seeking to save Heather House from imminent closure. Compounded by the representation that we see here behind me tonight, this brings to light the value that our community places on its beloved community centre, a value that we feel that has been underestimated, even ignored, by those who would see Heather House closed at the end of this month purely on financial grounds. Heather House is home not just to the handful of clubs and organisations listed in our papers this evening, but to a variety of ad hoc charitable and community events, as well as private functions, including children's parties and wedding receptions. It is situated in the heart of one of the most deprived areas of our borough, where many of its users do not have the means to go further afield for such events. It has provided an affordable venue for over 40 years that has and will hopefully continue to to play a future host to some of the warmest memories in numerous local people's lives. Since bringing the proposed closure to public attention last month, I have been saddened to hear residents use words like underhanded, secretive, unfair, engineered over many years and undemocratic to describe the current position adopted by the Council on the issue. Permit me to give this some context. Our papers in front of us stipulate that this saga began with the failure of 2 boilers in May, and before that all was fine and dandy. However, public perception quite clearly is that Heather House has been allowed by the Council to deteriorate over some 10, 15 years, maybe longer. This has led to a reduction in the number of usable functions for the building, in which the Council is seen to be entirely complicit. When the boiler failure looked to be the straw to break the camel's back, no one was consulted. When the decision to stop taking bookings into autumn of this year was made, no one was consulted. In total, it was 3 months between the initial boiler failure and the first contact between the Council and users of Heather House, Appendix A in your reports this evening. In summary, the true value of Heather House has so far been ignored in the prospective closure decision because nobody who truly knows it was ever consulted. Our report makes out that there is a mass exodus from Heather House users occurring at the moment. One thing that is missing in the papers this evening is that many of the organisations that are deemed to have found a location fit for purpose already are doing so against their will and have made explicit that they intend to return if Heather House is kept open past this evening. We, the undersigned, are not being unreasonable in our demands. We are not looking for you to pledge hundreds of thousands of pounds this evening to the upkeep of a building that we acknowledge needs a carefully thought out replacement, not extensive repair. I've also made many signatories aware that initial planning for the future, shiny, new, fit-for-purpose building has already been explored to a certain degree, but it is not confirmed, nor without its stumbling blocks ahead. We ask that Heather House be maintained and kept in use until those plans are set in stone, not closed now in hope of a replacement one day, but at risk that that day may never come. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Burton. Okay, members, the Constitution states that we can either refer without further discussion to the next ordinary meeting of the appropriate committee or subcommittee when it will be included in the appropriate officer's report, or we can consider the meeting in conjunction with any report that has been placed on the agenda concerning the matter raised if councillors feel that a report is not necessary. Therefore, as we have a report on the agenda tonight relating to Heather House, I would suggest we consider the petition in conjunction with that report. Everyone agreed? Okay. Item 12, the Heather House Community Centre. We now come to the main item relating to Heather House. For the benefit of the public here tonight, I will set out a process that will be taken for this item. The officer will present his report. We will then hear statements from 2 members of the public. I will then read out a statement from Councillor Pickett, who could not be here tonight. Finally, we will then hear from any visiting members before we debate this item. Do I do that bit next as well? Yeah. There is an exempt appendix to this report, so if members feel the need to discuss any aspect of that, we would need to go into part 2. Okay?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so we provided the report, and I fully appreciate this is a very challenging situation that we're dealing with here. From an officer perspective, a lot of work has been done to try and explore different possibilities as to how we can move forward. But just to set the scene a little bit more, in terms of the work that this committee does, we are operating in an extremely constrained financial environment at the moment, with enormous pressures on this committee, most notably around homelessness, which is a rising problem, and we are already seeing forecast budget overspends for this committee's work for the year. So it really is that context that, you know, we're discussing Heather House in this light. I think in the presentation made earlier, you know, I think it's apparent that the condition of the building has lapsed over a number of years. This isn't a situation that's just happened this year. This is something that's crystallising now, and we're, you know, trying to find the most appropriate way to deal with it. For sure, from an officer perspective, there's, you know, no desire whatsoever to understate the value of the facility. We have endeavoured to consult with the local councillors as much as we reasonably can, and get into the intricacies of it all, and to explore what possible solutions there may be. Really, we're struggling with on two fronts here. The facility is not meeting its revenue targets for income, number one, and obviously things have now come to a head because we've got a number of expensive repairs to undertake in order to keep the building in a proper condition for visitors and so forth. In the report, 4 options are set out, but I think it's clear that 3 and 4 are the most appropriate options in this situation. I don't think that's in any doubt at all. You know, it's whether we would focus our immediate efforts and resources in finding a solution for the long term, looking to redevelop the facility, paid for through some provision of housing in the vicinity, and that's all set out in the report. And from an officer point of view, you know, that is possibly the most pragmatic way to go, you know, focus on the solution that everyone wants for the long term. I can see the argument made that, you know, we should try and keep the facility operating in the short term while we work towards getting a long-term new facility, you know, fully scoped and built and so on. And, you know, I think there is potential for that new facility, but, you know, and I think Councillor Burton will say, I've been quite candid with this, you know, any kind of major capital expenditure project such as this, where you're talking, you know, with new housing and a new facility, you know, several £1 million and so on, it's not something that's quick to deliver. You know, you've got a 1-year period to sort out your planning consents, then probably a 18 to 24-month construction period too. So it's not a quick solution. The financial viability of a new facility paid for through the development of housing is probably doable, but it's quite marginal, and there aren't other sources of funding that we can draw upon. You know, that we aren't holding Section 106 monies for this kind of infrastructure, unfortunately. But as I'd sort of explained to the councillors, I would absolutely give my best endeavours to try and make it all happen for the local community. Obviously, if that doesn't provide the necessary assurance, you know, I can fully understand why people would want to go for option 3, and the sums we're talking about there aren't enormous given the council's overall spend. So yes, of course it could be done. The committee can make that decision to invest a bit of money for the next 12 months or so to buy us time. Of course that can be done. But, you know, it was a finely balanced judgment from an officer perspective as to what we would recommend, just because the council's resources are so constrained at this time. So I think that's probably enough from me at this point. Obviously, we've got my colleague Matt Roberts here as well, who can answer some of the questions that may or may not come up. But really, that's the situation as we see it as officers. You know, there's no other agenda than that, other than to work to provide a long-term solution to provide this facility. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, William. Matt, you need to say anything at the moment? No? Okay. Okay, well then, now I'd like to hear the statements from the two members of the public. First of all, I'd like to call Mrs Harris to the table. If you could take your seat, Mrs Harris, and press the middle button, and you then have 3 minutes to make your statement.
Good evening. I'm Veronica Harris, and I'm chairman of Lakeside Shortmap Bowls Club. We've been using Heather House now for over 20 years, and we provide a facility which is very much appreciated in the area. We have members from their 50s up to our oldest member of 93. And being an area with not a lot of facilities, we have many members who are widows and widowers who use Heather House for companionship as well as doing activities. And many of them cannot travel to other areas because they haven't got transport. One of our members even comes in a mobility scooter. Now, we've been at Heather House for over 20 years. Before that, we were at Moat Park in another council pavilion, which was pulled down because of a flat roof. And the council at that time found us, Heather House, as our permanent home, as we were told, and moved our equipment into Heather House. Now, we've got over £5,000 worth of equipment at Heather House, and we have not been able to find another facility where we can store our equipment and play. And it means that unless you find us other accommodation or we're able to go on using Heather House, we're disappointing a lot of people who have not got anywhere else that they can go. Heather House, unfortunately, no money has been spent on maintenance on it, virtually, in the whole 20 years that we've been there. So the facilities have deteriorated. And in that time, we've seen the bookings go down simply because it's deteriorated. Even the kitchen now is not very good. At one time, the cooker and the fridge went because they'd been there for about 30 years. A new fridge was put in, but the council, in their wisdom, decided to put in not another cooker, but a microwave. And we've had quite a lot of people who've come to have a look at the hall and haven't made a booking simply because there's nowhere to heat up any food or to do cooking for a party or a gathering. Now, this sort of thing really is not acceptable. You said that the amount of revenue has fallen. Well, the reason why it's fallen is because the Heather House has deteriorated.
Sorry to interrupt. Could I ask you to finish now, please, Mrs. Harris?
Right, thank you.
Thank you. If Mr. Tong could come forward, please. Mr. Tong, if you take a place at the table and press the middle button, please. As the last person, you have 3 minutes to make your statement.
I'll start now. I might well repeat what Mrs. Harris has said in some respect. Okay, so my name is John Tong, as you've said. I've been involved with Heather House for just 10 years. I represent and run Samara Bowls Club there, and I'm also involved with a second Bowls Club and also a member of the Active Retirement Group. There are another 2 groups who share the same passion as us for indoor bowling, for our game, and making 4 groups in total who meet at Heather House or have met at Heather House. Our bowls group, similarly, is attended by retired members aged between 65 and 92 here, and it provides a means for us to get out off our backsides and socialise, have a bit of competition, and is of great benefit to our overall well-being. We have made good friends within our group. In fact, people who have moved away from Maidstone now travel from Herne Bay and Gravesend on a regular basis to support us. Over our 4 groups, we've looked at over 25 buildings which have been unable to find suitable alternative locations to move to. Whilst there are buildings that would allow us to bowl, these cannot store our equipment. The Y Centre, a new facility off Cripple Street, was looked at, and again, no storage. So we, Samara Bowls Group, have relocated, hopefully on a temporary basis, to the school centre at Seneca. They have given us a space outside to erect a storage shed. This has only allowed us to store 3 of our 4 mats, and we've had to shorten the playing lengths of our mats to fit into their hall. The situation is far from ideal. Our members are not altogether happy with the scenario, and there not being a convenient bus route to get to the school centre as we've enjoyed at Heather House. During our time at Heather House, little has been done to improve it with no investment to upgrade. As you know, the heating has been an issue for many years now, with the boilers working well beyond their useful expectancy and being given a quick fix until they have now been condemned, and we find ourselves threatened with the whole enclosure. Maybe businesses such as Golding Homes in particular, as they are involved with the Maidstone Borough Council with regard to the development of the area, as reported in the Kent Messenger, or any other business, could assist in the short term to keep Heather House open. Not only for us, but for the benefit of Parkwood and the community. And I'm going to say I would hope if a replacement hall was built, it would have sufficient floor space and storage for bowls clubs and other activities continue in future years.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson.
Thank you.
I'm now going to read out a statement from Councillor David Pickett, who is Chairman of the Heritage, Culture and Leisure Committee at Maidstone Borough Council. Unfortunately, he couldn't be here tonight. I would like to inform the committee that I am against the proposed plan to close the Heather House Community Centre as stated, mainly on the grounds that the facility is no longer fit for purpose and usage. The centre has been for many years a popular and well-used facility with users and visitors both local and from around the borough. It is a facility and function that cannot be lost. I am aware that plans may be drawn up for a future facility on this site, possibly 2 years away, but in the meantime, the Council has a duty of care to the residents and users of Heather House to provide an amenity that helps social cohesion and health and well-being. Health and recreation is so vital in our model environment. As it appears that the boilers are defunct, the roof requires repair and the kitchen needs an upgrade, I am at a loss as to why, over the years, a programme of continuous maintenance was not in place to ensure that the facility, so important to the well-being of the community, was kept in good order. A maintenance budget and positive interventions would have certainly helped offset the costs that we have currently before us. The local community cannot wait a minimum of 2 years before a new facility is built. This is a social issue and support must be given to help keep Heather House available until a new build is in place. I have suggested in the short term that the Council adopts a sticking plaster scheme whereby a minimum amount is spent to retain the present building and mount essential repairs and remedial work. I would venture a suggestion that new boilers be installed at Heather House now at present cost, and then when any new build is ready they are removed to the new facility. This may be cheaper in the long run. To conclude, Heather House is a vital part of the local social structure and is an important part of the Council's well-being and recreation facilities and should be retained and maintained until a new hall can be planned and brought into action. Okay. Councillor English.
I think this is already on. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members, officers, members of the public. If I could continue my colleague Councillor Pickett's theme, I suppose. It is indeed unfortunate, to put it mildly, that we didn't, as a council, plan this, because if there had been a scheme of maintenance in place, then of course, with all the building that's taken place in South Maidstone, some Section 106 money could have gone to this development. However, we are where we are, so going back over past ground is going to not necessarily achieve a great deal. What I could say is that it does flag up that we need to plan very carefully from here on in. Whether it's a new housing scheme or 2 new housing schemes that fund a new development, or whether it's money coming from the wider area through CIL, Community Infrastructure Levy, for members of the audience, we need to have careful planning and a scheme in place. But I do think it would be, I think, unfortunate if the residents of Parkwood were to have a facility not there for 2 years because of the poor planning of Maidstone Borough Council, frankly, over the last 20-25 years. So what do we do to get from A to B without going through C, D, E, F, G and all the other letters of the alphabet? Because I've been in positions, I'm sure all of us have been in positions where a temporary situation where a facility is removed whilst another one is supposed to come along becomes the permanent situation, and somehow or another there's a delay, something happens and the permanent facility is delayed, doesn't happen, the funding doesn't come along, and it can be 10 years, 20 years, 30 years before the new facility comes along. Now, what we have to do here is ensure that we do have a plan in place so that funding can be identified. The plan has to be there, otherwise we'll never get the funding. And then we have to ensure that, as other people have said, that there is a very firmly time-limited sticking plaster applied. And then we have to find where the money comes from. And that's the tricky part, isn't it? Now, I'm not going to sit here this evening, as I'm not a member of this committee, I'm a visiting member, so it would be very impetuous, even impertinent of me to tell you how to find the money. But I do think that as a council, we owe it to the residents of Parkwood and the wider area of Maidstone to try and find a one-off and I do mean one-off, short-term, strictly time-limited solution, if we possibly can. That may mean that we actually aren't in a position to actually say exactly what we're going to do here and now. It may need some research, it may need some further investigation. But I do think we should make every effort to do that, and only if we absolutely cannot possibly do it should we be looking at a closure between now and when the new facility hopefully opens. Now, I'm not going to tell you how to do it, but I think we do need to make a very, very sincere effort to try and find this bridging money for 2 years or so, because frankly, I'm very concerned that if it just closes, we may actually just never actually get around to sorting it out. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members, for listening, and I hope you do take on board that for an area that's allegedly apathetic, this shows you just how strongly the people of Parkwood feel about it.
Thank you, Councillor English. Right, members, time for debate and discussion. Councillor Mortimer.
Thank you, Chair. Well, basically, I do not want to see this centre closed, especially in Parkwood. Parkwood really needs a modern community facility that benefits all local residents and those from outside that come and visit. The maintenance and most defects must have been occurring over many years. And this used to be, as I remember it, a thriving centre and very well used. I'm also concerned about the way the centre has been run down. I'm surprised it hasn't been flagged up before, and it's got to today sort of thing, and I'm thinking to myself, hang on a minute, I haven't heard it. I've visited it a few times, but I haven't heard about too many concerns. Doubts were actually raised in a report back in 2013, and that was signed off by the Cabinet member at the time when we were considering village halls and community centres. I'm also concerned about this sticking plaster approach that's possibly in the report, and that it might temporarily solve the situation, but we should be planning for the future and looking long term. I'm talking 20, 25 years, that sort of period. I'm also surprised that with all the regeneration that's gone up there, with Golding Homes, etc., we got a fair share of money in the Tovel area when the Coombe Farm development was taken out. We got a new community centre there. But Golding Homes, to give them their part, they did pay for the skate park there and they did pay for the outside gym. So they did that bit. But I understand there was no money went forward to the community or a community centre. We have the cost to consider, which is the most important thing out of this, and the true value is the benefit to the residents and the groups that use this facility. We need to see, as a committee, I think we need to see the audited books to actually understand the position of what's gone on here. And I do question why we have direct staff employed, because to me that appears to be a bit of a luxury, because I know many other centres where they get by. Now, I'm not saying about the YMCA, that's a different kettle of fish, but there's other centres where there's actually they ring people at home to book something and that sort of situation. My colleagues and I, we're fully aware of the continuous cuts that keep coming from the government to this council and every other local authority, which makes every decision that we make even more difficult. And this is now, all these decisions are actually hitting frontline services and affecting all our residents. I'm aware about community centre costs. I mentioned about Tovel Community Centre. I'm aware of the operating cost, the running, opening a centre. It took us 8 years to get off the ground and actually get a place. It's taken us 3 years to actually run it and actually get to a point where we can sort of step back a little bit. So I'm quite aware if this is lost, it's very difficult to get back again. So what do we do? Well, we need more information. We need to see the audited books. The money. Now, we have reserves. We could use reserves. We could use possibly last year's underspend, which I don't think has been allocated yet. Or it may have to come out of our own budget. but I think that's probably the most difficult one, and I'd like somebody to put their hand up and say, yes, we can take it from here, because there ain't no money, and we all know that. And as Councillor English mentioned earlier on, there's a SIL approach as well, which is a possibility. We must have a good community facility here. I fear if we close it, it will be many, many years away for the new one coming along. And with depleting money and all the cuts that are coming further along the line, I don't think it'll possibly. My crystal ball tells me it doesn't happen. It won't happen. Chair, I'd like to actually defer this item because I'd like to go and visit Heather House, because I haven't been in it for a long time. I understand the ward members have been up there and had a look round, but because it's a committee decision, I really think that we ought to go up and have a committee ought to go and visit it to get a good picture and a good grounding on it. Thank you.
Councillor Ring.
Good evening, everybody. I know a lot more than others on Heather House. Because of my role as previous cabinet member, that couldn't have come under my decision. I didn't have alls then. But I remember a nice little story that was told to me 3.5 years ago. In fact, this wasn't a story, it was a fact. I was approached by a senior officer of the council to say that themselves and the NHS had got a vision. That Parkwood didn't just need a community hall, they needed a lot more. They needed doctors. They needed help that young ladies couldn't get to Maidstone Hospital for maternity grants because they didn't have enough money for bus fares. Being I'm a local person who lives on Shetway and born and bred in an area of deprivation, I knew where they were coming from. So the idea was, this vision of a new hall was not half the size of what it is now up in the sky, but doing longer on the bottom, being rooms that doctors could use, that medical people could use, that a cath, etc., etc. Anyway, so my ears pricked up and I thought, this is fantastic. And I was told the idea that was going to the people that were all involved was that we took back the British Legion village. Sorry, I don't know its real name, but I've always called it that. And then there we would take it down, we will build a new hall with whoever would like to buy the property that the house stands on now. And because I come from an area of deprivation and I don't forgive very well, my fear is people tell us things but we never get them. So mine is seeing and believing. So I said I'm for anything as long as that gets built first. Long as, even if it's just an half a row of bricks, I can see this is going to actually happen. So then they went away and that was the discussion that was happening about. I wasn't the ward member for there. I didn't do planning for real because that's the only reason why I came to Parkwood, apart from in my personal life, but because I was doing planning for real. And then once I stopped that role, that was someone else to take over. That's the trouble with politics. So, as far as I was concerned, this was still going on in the background. I'd moved on, I'd done my bit of work, went back with written papers to say how the people felt, what they would like to see. So I'm sorry there's a gap. As for a plan of keeping the hall up to date, that was with an officer that's just retired. So all I'm saying is, this is just a bit thingy. And when I see this report the other day, my heart sunk, because there don't seem to be a bit of feeling in it at all. And I don't come from that. I've got to be able to feel that I've tried to support people. And 90% of the councillors feel the same. They've got to feel that we may not have done everything for you, but we tried a little bit. So my bit is, that sticky plaster's been going on for years. And you might as well try and find it for a little bit longer. And I think if you're going to write any reports, now the way to go forward would be to sit down at Fusion Caf and ask these people just to put one-liners. They'll put one-liners just to let you know. And you'll always get the fantastic, I want a swimming pool, I want... All in them, you'll find that little bit of truth, just what they would like. The gentleman who came on and said about the Bowls Club. Yeah, I know lots of the elder people go up there. We're going on a coach trip, they say to me. I go, are you? Oh, yeah, with the Bowls Club. We're going here for the weekend. It's brilliant to hear. But you'll never get anything done in areas of deprivation if you don't talk to the community. Every single one of them just to ask, what do you think? Even if it's, what colour would you like to see it go as? So, my idea would be, is we put a sticky plaster, we work with the people, yeah, and then when we've got this nice little building in our vision, and what we'd like to see about it, go to all them people that can contribute towards it. The PCT, the NHS, anybody that works in that sort of field that would like to be part of this brilliant thing for the people of Parkwood. See how much money they got, see where we can go from there, and I'm sure you will get a start. An happy medium without trying... I'm going to say something terrible here, but it's never stopped me before and it's not going to now, so you better save me, Robin. If this was in the middle of Pendle and Heath, you wouldn't even have dreamed of gone about it this way. Never. Because for starters, the ward member would know. When Matt came to me and turned round and said, this is going, I went, well, when did I tell you, mate? He went, yesterday. I went, yesterday? Well, wasn't you there at the beginning? When things went wrong on my ward, they used to say, oh, Marion, so-and-so's happened at Harmony Hall. Oh, okay then. Not just try to shut it behind his back. You're not going to move without ward members. So we're going to make a little bit of a fight back here. Because we are in areas of deprivation, we cannot be ignored. And I'm more than happy. I would like to see, and I'd like to put this forward actually, I would like to see the number 3, all right, option, carry out the temporary repairs, but also work with the residents and people that could help to benefit this new hall to take this forward. And that would leave us completely free to be able to negotiate on whoever wishes to build their houses there. And even if it's ourselves, we would like to see a new hall. And plus get any extra money that we'll put that down so it hasn't cost much on the housing. I think that's only fair. So that's what I'd like to see. I don't know if I've got a backup.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Ring. Just coming back on one particular point made there about the NHS, that is a line of inquiry that we pursued over the summer when we engaged our consultancy team, the architects and cost consultants. We did approach the clinical commissioning group as to their interest in participating in a redevelopment project to create a new doctor's surgery as part of a new community centre, and unfortunately we couldn't gain any interest or funding from them. But just to clarify the point that was the first sort of line of inquiry we pursued.
I've got Councillor Garton next.
Mr. Chairman, looking at the options presented to us tonight, option 4 looks very interesting. Knock it down, rebuild it. Wonderful. I could almost go for that. Except there's no timeline to it. It's a bit wishy-washy. It's a bit like, well, we may do it eventually, like Councillor English put forward in his speech. I am very much aware of the Maidstone Strategic Plan, which requires us to have a health and well-being action plan, intervention to provide practical solutions to improve individuals' well-being. Now, this is something we should bring forward as borough councillors. I'm involved up to my head about street cleaning, bin collections, etc. No, it's the people's well-being. That's why I was elected for on this borough council. And for that, I would very much support Councillor Ring's motion that we go for option 3 for the sticky plaster, with a caveat of a timeline that we put on option 4, bring us to the next meeting a plan how we go ahead, not to build something in the glorious future when we have money again, when we just win the national lottery or whatever, or find a pot of gold, but how can we build a replacement within the next 4 years? And that should be the timeline here. And that's why I would like to go with Councillor Mortimer's recommendation to defer this meeting, have the officers come back with a structural financial plan at the next meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Garton. Councillor Perry.
Thank you, Chairman, members. I think it's a hell of a lesson to be learned here, actually, particularly in the way we maintain buildings, and clearly we've got ourselves into a real pickle. I think there's a real social issue here, and I'd actually have a red line here. I very rarely go down the red line route, but on this one I do, because I just do not think we can even consider closing this facility. I just don't think we can. So option 3 must be the starting point. But I would have a big caveat here, and I agree with what Councillor Ring has said and also Councillor Garton. I would actually make this a condition and an instruction from this committee that we undertake a plan for the future. A proper plan that comes back, that's our decision, and in the meantime, we keep this facility open, because I think it's a major social issue. I know even it's not just in urban areas, community centres are incredibly important, whether you live in a rural area or whether you live in an urban area. To me, they're almost the heart of any community, and they're incredibly important. We should never even consider closing one down, particularly one that's under our own control. It seems to me an absolutely crazy decision. I'm sorry to use those words. So my view is, again, that we keep this open. Maybe it is the sticky plaster approach, I accept that, but as a caveat, an absolute caveat, we start the planning process for a future improved facility. Then we don't have this, because I think, as Pete said, option 4 is a bit wishy-washy, and I wouldn't really trust it, actually, because I know when I see things like that, I think, oh yeah, that's going to be kicked into long grass as soon as they can do it. And I'm sorry, this must not be kicked into long grass. It's got to be a definite plan for the future, but in the meantime, we keep this facility open. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Perry. Councillor Joy.
Can I begin by saying I totally support the need for centres, village halls, any halls that engages with the community. It's very difficult for me, as I said, which I shouldn't have probably said when people were saying they'd been lobbied, signing petitions. I haven't had the indulgence of knowing what I should know until I read these papers. That is an apology. And I too did question Councillor Burton as to say it would have been, in my opinion, better if the committee had had the opportunity to go up to Heather House. We've all been there. I've been to family parties and whatever. Probably haven't been in the kitchen, but I've borrowed a broom and swept or whatever. But the point I'm trying to make here, it is so difficult for me, whether it's Denise as me as a person that uses the hall as a councillor, but it's such a big decision for me to make today to say I agree that we take money from a pot that we haven't got and put it into the sticking plaster keeps being used. So we put the sticking plaster on for 2 years. Now, if a report had come back and there was a plan in here so that I knew there was community engagement, I'm chairman of the my church hall, community centre, and I know how hard I struggle to get someone to volunteer to be the booking clerk, to go down at 10 o'clock and make sure they've switched the lights off because we can't afford to have the heater running. I totally understand. And with my heart, I'd probably give you the whole caboodle and say, go and build something. But I've got to be a councillor and say that if I put 10,000, 20,000, 50,000 pounds into one thing, something could come up where it bites our bum, basically, and we're in a really difficult position. So the only thing that I'm really saddened is that I'm not sitting here with papers that's giving me all the information I want so I can see there's a plan for the future. And I will say I was disappointed with what I'm told, but you can't always believe what you're told. But I was told, like a lot of other people, that it all happened so quick that we were just told. That isn't right, and I agree with that. But is it right to put the sticking plaster on something before we have all the information? We need to get people on board that we know is going to carry on supporting. And I really felt when the Bowls Club was saying, you know, they need their storage. I'm so hard, I tell you, it made me feel awful because people will come into my centre, want to use it, and I have to say to them, sorry, you can't have a cupboard, you can't have a... because our insurance goes sky high with whatever they're storing there. So there's so much that needs... And that's why, and I don't know if Derek did do it, that I was nodding my head when Councillor Garton said, we need to defer it until we have that. I'm sorry, but it is very difficult for me at this moment to sit here and put my hand up when I haven't got enough to do that. So if I do anything, it would be to abstain. And I don't very often abstain. I usually can make a legitimate decision. So if it hasn't already been proposed by my colleague here, Councillor Mortimer, about a deferment, I know you've probably changed your mind now because it is unusual, Clive. Not at the moment while I'm still speaking, yeah?
Sorry, one at a time, please.
Oh, sorry.
I say, it's a wholly irregular thing. You've had the opportunity to speak. I have to say I thought it was grossly improper when you went and spoke to the councillor in the middle of the meeting. I think it would almost undermine anything the councillor were to say, or that he shouldn't speak further. So I think unless that there is going to be a correction which is wholly in the interest of the committee to know what that correction is, that having had the opportunity to speak, you don't have the opportunity to engage in the debate. And I'm concerned that what you're trying to do is engage in the debate, and you've spoken. It's not your time to speak now. I mean, so it's a matter for the chairman. I'd say unless it's anything further than a correction of a fact which is so grossly wrong that would lead the committee to make a bad decision, that you should not be engaging this any further.
Yeah, I would actually agree with that because, you know, if you're going to make the decision with the sticking plaster, you know, it's that time of year now, and I don't think we can reasonably carry on with, as we are.
Okay. Okay, Councillor...
Sorry, I was stopped in mid-flow and I hadn't actually finished. So can I come back?
Sorry, you may, Councillor Joy.
Thank you. As I finished, I was saying about the deferral, and thank you, William, for what you've just said. I do understand that. But as I said, I can't vote personally, and I'm being very open about this, but I need to say when it does go to the vote, I will abstain, but I want recorded my reasons why. Thank you.
I've got Councillor Perry first.
Thank you, Chairman. I think we're getting slightly confused here because, to me, and I think it's a deferral issue coming back again in a different form, I don't think we've got an option. Either if we say no or defer, then this closes, it seems to me. That seems to me, and I'm not in favour of that. I think we have to commit ourselves, and I'm sorry, because I think this is so important. And I also think that option 3 and option 4 are linked, actually. They are linked. Because what we're saying is we keep Heather House open, right? And then we, at the same time, we plan for the future. And we definitely plan. We don't say, oh, this will be nice to have in 2 or 3 years' time. We actually instruct officers to go back and plan. And that's what it is. It is linked. In a sense, it's options 3 and 4, but it's option 3 to keep it open on maybe it's a temporary basis. I don't know what that would be, but it's got to stay open in my view. And then because this is part of our service, we provide as a council. I'm starting to rant a bit, and I don't mean to, but to me, we're talking about key services here, and keeping a community centre open that we own is part of that key service. It's a social service that is incredibly important. And I think this committee should commit itself to that. For me, it's just fundamental. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, I've been watching. Councillor Ring.
Sorry. I think it's all got a little bit out of hand, and I'm just ashamed to say this is a community and we're acting this way in front of the public. I'll apologise. So can I just say then that I'd like to go back to my original thing that I said at the beginning. We stick a sticky plaster on, yes? And we work very closely, all of us, to take a picture and a project forward with the residents of the park and get as many other organisations and partnerships involved who could maybe come up with a few bits of cash to please poor Mr Green now, who's worried about the budgets. And I'm a great believer, with all kindness and all retooling and putting our heads together, we can actually sit down and get a starter budget on this, because whatever goes on that bit of land, we'll be able to give you the refunds back. And if we say a certain time, then you'll have that in your budget before you know where you are, Mr Green.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Ring. Councillor Garton.
I'm all for option 3. We can decide on option 3 tonight, with the caveat that we are aiming for option 4, and we need to make sure that the officers can come back with facts and figures for 4 at the next meeting. I think that's what we should decide tonight. We should not defer a decision, but we should defer the part of where do we go in 4. But we put the caveat on our tonight's decision. We want to go with 4 and we want to go with it speedily.
Councillor Mortimer.
Thank you. I understand where you're coming from, but my problem, again, going back to what's been said on this side, is that in option 3, it does have for the extended building life for around 2 years. That is not good enough for me, because I know what happens and how long things take. Unfortunately, that can't go forward as it is at the moment, because I think it is too suspect and it won't guarantee anything.
Okay, bear with me, members, a minute. Okay, members, we've got 3 separate motions on the table. So I'll ask Mrs Matthews to read each one out, and I'd need a proposer and a seconder for each motion. Okay.
We'll read that one.
Hang on a minute.
So obviously is that...
Sorry, could we have some quiet, please, people? Thank you.
Is that obviously during their speeches during the debate, councillors mentioned things which they would like to be proposed but were not formally proposed, seconded and voted on. Okay? And so what the chairman is doing, I think it's reasonable, is to go back on those things that were aired as possible proposals and actually seeing if they are proposed, seconded and can be voted on. I think that's perfectly reasonable in the circumstances because there wasn't formal proposal and seconding or voting of any motion earlier on.
Okay, Robin, thank you.
Okay, so the first one. Councillor Mortimer moved to visit the facility and therefore defer the decision until you've had that visit. You want to withdraw it? Okay.
Second motion.
Councillor Mrs Ring moved for option 3 and to work closely with the residents and people that could help to benefit the new hall to take this forward. And with the caveat, which I think somebody else put forward, was that of a timeline of within the next 4 years.
Happy with that, Maren?
No, I think that's Patrick.
Perhaps the better thing to do would be, if it's not correct, to withdraw it and a fresh proposal could be made. I think we're actually dealing with the proposals that have already been aired first. But I would suggest, given that what is being put to you now is not what you proposed, that it might be better to withdraw your proposal, allow this process to go through, and then any further proposals and seconding and actually voting on it could actually take place.
May I, Mr Chairman, may I withdraw my caveat, the 4 years caveat, which was coming from me?
Okay. Right, so that's Marian's proposal, is it? So is that your actual proposal, Councillor Ring?
And I would be more than happy that we do keep an eye on it. We're not going to go away, and it's got to happen. How we stand here, these people have got to have a hall, one way or another. Are we all behind that?
Right, can you give us a minute, Councillor Ring? Yeah. Microphone.
Oh.
Okay, members and members of the public, can we have some quiet, please? Right. So you want the original? Okay. Right, Councillor Ing, well, you do it.
Right. I'm going to read out the original proposal you put forward, Councillor Mrs Ring, which was that you move for option 3 and work closely with the residents and people that could help to benefit the new hall to take this forward. That was what you originally said. She wants to add anything to it. So you want to add, yeah?
Yes. Perhaps just to provide a bit more clarification, because I don't think the facts have been sort of really put forward on this. We have done quite a bit of work on the redevelopment option anyway, so we have already gained pre-application planning advice, which looks encouraging. So that ball is rolling already and has been for some time. So what I'd suggest is that you go for option 3, but just add a simple sentence on the end that you would look to receive a costed business plan for the redevelopment of the facility within a 3-month period.
Yes.
Okay.
And then afterwards we work with the residents, yeah.
Okay. Is there a seconder for that proposal? Councillor Garden. We ask if there's any other proposal. I believe there was a third proposal. No? Is there any other proposal on this then? Okay.
Sorry.
Is yours working? Oh, okay, I'm on. Just to say, if what William, Mr. Cornell had said at the beginning, that had already happened, as I was saying, there was no detail of that. So I'm sitting here thinking, pie in the sky, whereas if what you've just proposed, I'm more happy with. Okay? So I think you've got it right.
That's fine. We'll vote on that now.
Right, there is no other proposal. Sorry, then.
Councillor Garden seconded it, and before you vote, Mr. Burton should leave.
So, right, okay. Has he gone? I can't see him. No, he's there. Yeah. Sorry. Councillor Burton, could I ask you to leave now, please? Okay, I'm going to run through that again. I'm going to ask Mrs. Matthews to read the proposal again so that we're clear what we've got now.
Okay, so option 3 is carry out temporary repairs, replace the 2 boilers with a single boiler at a cost of 15,000, patch the roof, etc., etc. And then we're adding, look to receive a costed business plan for the facility within a 3-month period.
Redevelopment. Councillor Ring, okay with that? Seconded by Councillor Garton, is that correct? Yeah. Okay, we will now vote on... Yes. Redevelopment, yeah. Yeah. Okay. Has everyone got that? Right. Okay, we're now going to vote on that, members. So all in favour of that proposal? Anyone against? Any abstentions? Thank you. Right, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes agenda item 12. Members of the public are quite welcome to stay and listen to all the good fun and games for the rest of the meeting, or you can go home. Yeah. Right, members, we're going to take a 5-minute break now. Sorry?